Donate.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Oh my God, everybody. It's Mucked Up Friday, you bastards.
Today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. How significant and potentially breathtaking and broad-based could this ruling be? What kind of ripple effect could we see?
I think this is a massive decision. Again, Kenji is right. It's unprecedented for the court to use its compelled speech doctrine to apply to circumstances like this when we're dealing with public accommodations laws. These laws are rife throughout the country. Many jurisdictions have them as a means of ensuring that individuals are not subject to discrimination in the conduct of their daily lives and in commerce. And this would basically be a license for individuals to decide based on their own moral beliefs or conscience that they don't want to serve certain groups. And there really is no limiting principle that I can see based on my initial very quick review of this decision that the court's identified. I want to connect this back to last term in Dobbs, where Justice Thomas and his concurrence noted that he would be willing to reconsider a wide range of decisions, including Obergefell versus Hodges, which is the 2015 decision that legalized same-sex marriage. We haven't seen any imminent assaults on Obergefell, but this is an opening salvo. Once you have acknowledged and recognized that individuals have a right to discriminate against LGBTQIA couples in the workplace, in public accommodations, then you're pretty much on your way to ensuring that we are normalizing discrimination. And, you know, Roe versus Wade and overturning it was a 50-year project. This could be the beginning of a 50-year project that culminates in overruling Obergefell versus Hodges, as Justice Thomas desired in that concurrence. So again, this is a court that is drunk on its own power. It's a 6-3 conservative supermajority, and they're basically doing what they want. Laura Jarrett mentioned that this was a woman who hasn't actually been asked to provide a website to any gay couple.
Hello.
The court didn't have to take this case. It's not clear that there was jurisdiction to take this case, but it has nonetheless issued this broad and breathtaking ruling that will dramatically change public life for millions of couples.
Seriously, dude, this is what I was telling you yesterday. I mean, it is really the mysterious case of the fake gay marriage website and the real straight man who this girl says asked her to make a gay wedding website for. When that man, the straight man, the real straight man, was approached by the media and asked, you know, did you actually ask this Lori lady to make you a gay wedding website? He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm very married, I have children, and I'm straight. This was a concocted, made-up case. The Supreme Court is cheating. The Supreme Court is illegitimate because it cheated to be a 6-3 majority. You know, it's fine to have a 6-3 majority. It's fine to have a 51-49 country. It's fine to have, you know, a president that won, you know, the electoral college, but not the majority vote, right? We know this. We live in a country like that. But it's not okay to cheat. Okay, and that is what the Supreme Court did in order to be a 6-3 Supreme Court. Do not forget that that is where we begin the conversation about this here Supreme Court. The fact that Merrick Garland was denied a confirmation hearing when Obama was president and had 11 more months on his term by Mitch McConnell makes this Supreme Court's majority illegitimate. Now, moving on. We are all grieving. We're grieving because the country, I mean, it's like they're ripping off Band-Aids, one after the other, after the other, after the other. We don't even get closure. We don't even get a minute to catch our breath when they come up with the next illegitimate, ridiculous, you know, codification of discrimination or, you know, and all they do is change a word, right? You know how when people used to talk to you about the law and you didn't, actually have any political science courses under your belt, or you still don't, it's fine. But they would tell you, you have to understand that the law comes down to the word shall and may. And shall is a very strong word, and may, it's a wiggle word. It gives you, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Shall means you do it, right? Well, here we are literally switching words, okay? What the Supreme Court did, because you might be wondering, how in the hell do they get to discriminate against, first of all, a woman who has no standing? Meaning, standing means that you were harmed, right? To get standing, you have to show you were harmed somehow in the legislative scheme of things. And that harm actually cost you your reputation or money or opportunity, whatever. Okay, that gives you standing. Well, this woman never was asked to create a website for anybody that she somehow objected to. It never occurred. This is a fake case. And so she had no standing to be in the court, but there she is in the court. So the case is manufactured out of whole cloth, number one. Number two, the way that they ruled on it is bogus. What they did was they said, you know how since, the civil rights movement of the 60s being what it was, that you can't deny service to somebody at a lunch counter or in a store or in public accommodations or in housing, why would she then be able to deny service when she's open to the public as a web designer, if she at all was? The way they got there was they changed service to speech. Swear to God. They said she's not denying service. She's saying that she has the right to say no. She has the right to say, I object. She has the right to say, I'm so sorry, but that just ain't kosher. That's not legitimate. That's not, this is actually opening the door for discrimination based on what she's claiming is her religious interpretation of the Bible. That's what she's saying. And that her religious interpretation of the Bible tells her that she cannot and will not and won't and doesn't want to and never will make a gay wedding website for anybody who wants to marry somebody of the same sex. So she's never been asked to do that, number one. And number two, if you're open to the public, you're open to the public. So they couldn't find a way to make that okay, that she didn't want to serve the public but be open to the public. So they said, this is expression, meaning this is speech. That a web designer is exercising free speech. And under the rules of free speech, you can discriminate by saying no in a public accommodation. I mean, the result of discrimination is going to be exactly the same. This is why back then, when we were all talking about Black Lives Matter and people were screaming about, people that said White Lives Matter, and people were screaming and screaming. And I said, don't you get it? We're all black now. And then the year after that, we all got, kicked in the teeth as women. Now this year, you're getting kicked in the teeth as, same-sex couples. And then you're getting kicked in the teeth again with affirmative action, which is a modest policy meant to right all the institutionalized racism that was wrong about this country for 150 years, okay? And now they're saying, okay, we found a way around public service accommodations. We'll say it's not service, it's speech. This is the way they found the way around Citizens United too, remember? Because money in politics is bribery. Okay, it's quid pro quo. It's I'll give you money if you do this. I'll give you money if you rule this way, if you legislate that way. It's bribery. So they said, oh, no. You don't understand. You're not smart enough to understand that what seems like bribery, that looks like bribery, that smells like bribery, that has the same effect as bribery is really speech. See, this is how corporations speak. They speak by spending money on buying politicians and Supreme Court justices. Wait, what? Yes, corporations are people, my friend. Wait, what? They have colonoscopies? They have abortions? They have EKGs? Corporations are people? They die? Really? Yes.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Supreme Court just ruled in favor of a Christian web designer who cited religious objections in refusing to make a website for a same-sex couple. I want to get your perspective. You're a member of Congress, but as I mentioned, you're an openly gay man. What was your reaction when you learned of the ruling?
Well, the decision is a dark day, not only for the LGBTQ community, but for democracy. And I cannot help but feel that the most consequential policy decisions are being decided not by elected officials, but by the unelected judges of the Supreme Court, particularly a right-wing supermajority. The Supreme Court is increasingly operating as a super legislature, and laws become politics by other means. And this particular decision reminds us that the greatest threat to LGBTQ equality is the weaponization of religious liberty. Religious liberty, properly understood, means freedom from discrimination, not freedom to discriminate. And if the Supreme Court continues to reinterpret religious liberty as a license to discriminate, it's going to have implications for civil rights laws at every level of government, and it's going to have implications far beyond the LGBTQ community.
Right. That's Richie Torres. He is an openly gay member of Congress. I believe he's the only openly gay member of Congress. Lindsey Graham, not so open, not so out, just so gay. But he's right. He's right. When you do this, when you actually say, when you gaslight people in law and you say that the freedom from discrimination is really the freedom to discriminate under religious principles, what you're saying is slavery is fine. Because if you'll remember, some of the people that were pro-slavers, pro-slavery, owning other people, actually went to the Bible for their justification, right? They looked at the Bible and they said, it's in there, I get to own slaves. This is exactly that. We're not up to the point where people are claiming that they have the right to own other people, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Because once you say that you have the free speech, this is why I've always told you, free speech protects you from government intrusion. It protects you from being told that you can't say something because the government said that's not anything you can say. You can't say the F word because the government says you can't say the F word. That would be an intrusion on your free speech because the government is telling you to do it. They actually gaslit people so hard in this Supreme Court opinion that they actually brought up a 1943 case. Okay, let me just show this to you. It's called West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett. Okay, what was that case about? That case was about West Virginia couldn't make the students in their schools say the Pledge of Allegiance during the height of World War II. They couldn't force kids to say anything. They couldn't force them. Well, isn't that the state telling children to do something? Yes. See, and that's what the First Amendment protects you from. It protects you from the state, from the government telling you you either have to say something or that you can't say something. That's what the First Amendment is all about, government intrusion. They use government intrusion and the idea that the state of West Virginia couldn't force people to say the Pledge of Allegiance during the height of World War II. Okay, when you would think people would want to, but okay, some people didn't, and some idiot brought a case, right? And the Supreme Court said, no, I'm sorry, but the government can't intrude on free speech. They can't make you say something. They can't make you not say something. And they have flipped it on its head and said a woman who doesn't make websites for gay couples may in the future think she wants to create websites for gay couples. I mean, you know how long it takes to get to the Supreme Court. So this is what, 5-6 years ago? She said she might want to. And she's been waiting all this time for the Supreme Court to say, oh no, under the First Amendment and free speech, you can say no. You can say no, and you can discriminate against people that you disagree with based on your biblical interpretation of your religion. I mean, this is so bizarre. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. It has nothing to do with, the state telling people to do a thing or not do a thing. This has to do with a woman that was created out of whole cloth, just like Citizens United was created out of whole cloth, in order to say that bribery isn't bribery, in order to say that bigotry and discrimination isn't bigotry and discrimination, that money is speech and discrimination is speech. I am grieving for our country. I am in such agony over this. But, here's where the hope comes. Here's where the hope comes. The hope comes because our children, okay, at least mine, and probably yours, I'm guessing, and if you're lucky enough to have grandchildren at this point in your life, they don't know a world where gay people aren't acceptable. They don't know a world where bigotry and open discrimination is pleasing or okay to the Lord or to them, okay? They don't know this world. They don't think it's, a thing. They don't understand that it's not ancient history. Now, this is why the attack on teaching history is so full throttle right now, so that the next generation that comes after them will not know all the evil that is done to people when you say freedom to discriminate is a thing under our Constitution. But right now, what we have is a voting aged population, that this seems very uncommon. This seems very not normal. This seems very, wrong. This seems bad. This seems like a world they don't want to live in. This seems like a world they don't want to, go towards or support. And so the only thing that we can do, and I'll never stop saying it until it happens, is to expand the Supreme Court. Why? Because we have illegitimate justices sitting on the court. We have justices who shouldn't be there, okay? Gorsuch should not be there. We have justices that shouldn't be there. Amy Coney Barrett shouldn't be there. Under the same exact logic that Mitch McConnell deployed against Merrick Garland's confirmation, meaning it was too close to an election. Amy Coney Barrett obviously should not be there either, if that's the criteria. She shouldn't. And Gorsuch shouldn't be there because you can't cheat and hold open a seat for 11 freaking months, okay? The hypocrisy and the illegitimacy of this court should be well known at this juncture. So we don't have a chance of impeaching them, removing them, and the process would be the same as, impeaching a president and removing a president. It's the same. Okay, and we don't have a chance at doing that if we don't have the House of Representatives to do the impeachment, and we don't have three quarters of the Senate to do the removal. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we could term limit them, but again, we would need the House, and we don't have the House, and we would need the Senate, more than 60, and we don't have that either. To expand the court, that's just a piece of legislation, but we don't have the House to introduce a piece of legislation like that. And we don't have 60 in the Senate to agree to a piece of legislation that would expand the court. And that's how simple that particular procedure is. So knowing that 51% of young voters, 18 to 24, showed up in 2020, but only 23% of them showed up in the midterms, and that the next election we have will be a presidential, I am hoping that they will give us the House and a Senate that could do this.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
I think this is a license to discriminate at the highest court. I think that this is a pattern that we've been seeing with the Supreme Court, where they're taking away rights instead of broadening rights for marginalized communities. We saw it yesterday. We saw it last year with Roe v. Wade for women, and now we're seeing it against the LGBTQ community. So we're seeing a pattern. We're part of it. Where does this stop? So what business can now deny myself and my wife access when we walk in? And I think they've left that really broad. I haven't read the decision yet, but from the top line analysis of it, I think that this is an open license to discriminate against LGBTQ people in America, which this court has signaled they want to roll back marriage, they want to attack the LGBTQ community, and this is their first step in doing so.
Right. And it's not just going to be the LGBT community. It's going to be every single minority community. Every single person in this country who is, not accepted by religious bigots is going to feel the wrath of religious bigots, and the Supreme Court just gave them permission to be religious bigots. I mean, we're going back to you can't sit at the lunch counter. This is the territory we're in here. And the idea that America wants to go backwards is just, I don't think that's the popular, belief. I don't think that's, the opinion of the people of the United States. And every poll that I look at, every single thing that I see says 98% of America wants to, have background checks. And 98% of America wants, to stay out of the privacy of, women making medical. 80% of the people, I mean, you keep looking at these numbers. None of this is supported by a majority of Americans. None of it. So here you have a Supreme Court that is undoing precedent on precedent, things that have been decided over and over and over and over again in courts across this country and in their court. And they're saying, well, this is our chance. Okay, we have a supermajority. This is our chance to, and they're not even making a showing. They're not even trying to make the showing of why precedent needs to be overturned. They're not saying like, okay, so what we see is institutionalized racism at the schoolhouse created harm for marginalized communities, and therefore we have to overturn, Dred Scott. Okay, we have to say, oh no, that idea that 3/5 of a person is a black person, that is causing people an enormous amount of harm. No, they're going the other way. They're saying, let's go back and let's do it all over again. And if we don't teach the kids the solution that was used last time, because we're not going to address any of the institutionalized racism that is embedded in American history. And if we refuse to teach them that there was institutionalized racism or institutionalized hatred for this group or that group or LGBT or whatever, then they won't know how to solve it, and we'll get away with it for another 50. I swear to God, that's what's going on. I swear to you it is. Meanwhile, we understand that there is affirmative action for white people that's been embedded in our Constitution since day one, right? I mean, the idea that they said all men are created equal, but we never lived up to it, but we never stopped trying, is really the point of America. It is. But they literally want to say that it's always been equal because it said so on the paper. And so we're going to pretend that it was never unequal. We're going to pretend that even when we started, people didn't own people. And we're not going to let the kids know that, so that the kids don't know that there was a solution to slavery called the 13th Amendment. Right? And we're not going to let them know. We're just going to say that they can say anything they want. They can discriminate whoever against anybody they want. Their parents can too. And it's okay because that's America. That's who America is. It's sickening. And I'm grieving. I'm literally grieving the loss of all the progress that we worked so hard together to make in this country. Now, here's where the white supremacy really lies, okay, in case anybody was wondering, what do I mean? Well, let's have a look-see at the Senate, just as an institution, because we want to talk about institutional racism. We don't want to make it personal here, although it's about to get very personal. But Wyoming, New York State, Montana, California. You know what the difference between those states are? Well, it would be population. They both and all get 2 senators. That's affirmative action for rural, sparsely populated states. You see what I mean? That is legitimate affirmative action. 2 senators for Wyoming's population and 2 senators for 40 million Californians' population. 2 senators for New York State, just the city of New York alone, you're talking about 8-9 million people, okay? Now, Rhode Island, 2 senators. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, if that's affirmative action for rural populations, for sparsely populated states. The same is evident in the Electoral College. Okay, the same thing, where the popular vote doesn't matter, meaning the number of votes you get really doesn't matter. What matters is 270 Electoral College votes, 270 electors. Now, we saw the cheating, okay? I think Rudy just made a deal. I think Rudy's going to cooperate. I swear to God, I don't know for sure, but that is just a little story that's out there, that Rudy is scared that he's going to be indicted in Georgia. He's scared that he's going to be indicted by Jack Smith. He knows that he went and tried to lie to the Senate in Georgia, to the state legislature in Georgia. And the same thing in New York. And he's apparently willing to say that he did commit these crimes and that, in exchange for immunity, in exchange for not being prosecuted. I don't know. We'll see. But while all that's making its way through the freaking court, we have to understand that we live in a country that has affirmative action for white people. And that we all agree right now that that's the way it is. So why are they looking to take away actions of an affirmative nature on behalf of people who don't have affirmative action built into the institutions of democracy, like LGBT, like African Americans, and by the way, this Asian American argument that most Asian Americans disagree with the end of affirmative action, and this was done by a white conservative guy. His last name's Blum. Okay, go figure it out. But Mr. Blum actually was able to talk some Asian American young people into believing that their culture was superior to other cultures and that they should bring this case, even though there is zero evidence that they have been harmed. In fact, Harvard, which was one of the topics in the affirmative action case, 28% of the population of students at Harvard are Asian American. So this is all illegitimate stuff from the very beginning of the case. All of it.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
It was an open question whether or not the court would find that the Biden administration simply violated the way they went about this. If that would mean that they said you didn't follow the Administrative Procedures Act, maybe go back, get comment, refine it, and we'll hear it again. But no, actually, they're saying that the Secretary of Education doesn't have the authority to forgive $430 billion in student loans. Again, the Biden administration looked to the HEROES Act, that 2003 congressional approval to forgive student loans temporarily under certain emergencies. They're saying, and I'm reading here from the majority opinion, saying that the secretary asserts that the HEROES Act grants him the authority to cancel $430 billion of student loan principal. It does not. We hold today that the act allows the secretary to, quote, waive or modify existing statutory or regulatory provisions available to financial assistance programs under the Education Act, not to rewrite a statute from the ground up.
I mean, so now we have the Supreme Court literally deciding that they don't like a piece of legislation. It was too big for Congress to actually legislate, the authority to the Secretary of Education to waive, you understand the word that was used there was waive or modify student loan debt. Why? Because the banks would have been left holding the loans and not getting paid. And so the Supreme Court decided that it didn't understand the word waive all of a sudden. And so they decided that they are going to, legislate from the bench because they don't like what the legislature legislated from the legislation that they passed. So they're not solving controversies anymore, which is what the court is supposed to be doing, right? The court is supposed to be solving controversies between courts. They're not supposed to be legislating. They're not supposed to be saying that if in a piece of legislation that was passed by the House, the Senate, and signed by a president of the United States that gives the Secretary of Education the authority, all the authority he needs to waive student loans, to modify student loans, and they think that that's going to harm bankers in Missouri, then they're going to change the meaning of the word waive. Just like they changed the meaning of the word discriminate. They said, you can't deny service, let's call it speech. Here they're saying legislation might be legislation, but we don't like it, so we're going to say that waive doesn't mean waive, it means something else. I mean, this is total bullcrap, okay? And they're doing it in a way that everybody thinks, well, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know. No. You know, I had all these notes that I made as I was reading, these. I don't even know why I made all these notes. I really don't. Because all it did was confuse the issue. And the issue is a simple one. They are legislating from the bench whenever they don't like the result of something that was previously legislated. Okay, like we codified gay marriage into law. You know that, right? We did. They don't like it. So they're going to change, the way that LGBT people are dealt with in our society by bigots. And that's going to bleed into, everybody else that we don't like, that they don't think should get a fair shake in your business, right? They don't think you should have to serve people you don't want to serve. What kind? Listen, either be open to the public or go private. I don't care. Up to you. But if you're open to the public, that means all the public. But anyway, Richie Torres, he was asked about this legislation and said, listen, they said that the word waive doesn't mean waive and modify doesn't mean modify. What do you think of that?
The Chief Justice wrote, quote, today we have concluded that the words waive or modify do not mean completely rewrite, that our precedent, old and new, requires that Congress speak clearly before a department secretary can unilaterally alter sections of the American economy. You just said that the court is too politicized and they're acting like a legislative branch. In the other case, student loan debt, they said it's not up to us, it's up to you, Congressman Torres and other members of Congress. Do you understand that they have a point there, or do you believe so?
Well, Congress did speak clearly. Congress passed a law that authorizes the Education Secretary to modify or waive any statutory or regulatory provision to protect borrowers affected by a national emergency. Congress did not say some provisions or most provisions. We said all provisions. And the Supreme Court proceeded to ignore the will of Congress in order to deprive more than 40 million households of student debt forgiveness. These 40 million households are burdened by nearly $2 trillion in student debt.
I mean, so they decided that the word waive means rewrite, and you didn't say rewrite. You said, I mean, this is craziness. This is mass madness, right? And here's another little hitch in this case. This is another reason why this case is so illegitimate from the start. Just like the fake web designer who was, saying she wanted to make, wedding websites, but she never did. But she didn't want to serve gay couples who never asked her to do any damn thing for her. Okay. Same thing with the Asian students that said that they were being, discriminated against in admissions at Harvard when clearly there was no discrimination in admissions for Asian Americans at Harvard. There are 28% of the student body at Harvard, and they're not 28% of our population. So there's no discrimination against them. It was all crafted, created, manufactured. This one too. And how do I know? Well, in this particular case, having to do with the student loan modifications or waiving of student loan obligations, 2 Texas students brought the case, okay? These 2 Texas students, one is Myra Brown and the other one is Alexander Taylor. These 2 Texas students brought the case, okay? And the Supreme Court said they don't have standing, meaning they weren't legitimate plaintiffs, okay? They weren't harmed by carrying all the student loan debt. The second portion of the case dealt with the state of Missouri and other states that said they would be harmed if student loans weren't paid back. They would be harmed because they would have a shortfall of what they were expecting to get paid by these students, okay, who can't repay their loans because of COVID, because COVID took them out of circulation, out of the workplace, and it's, they haven't had an opportunity to, make payments, right? That's why we did the emergency, relief. That's why we said we're modifying your loan or we're waiving your obligation for your loan to have to be paid back. Well, the states, they said, had standing. Oh, yeah. The students didn't. The students didn't. But a fake web designer does. And Asian Americans who weren't discriminated against do. Do you see how all these cases are bullcrap? They were bullcrap from go. They were bullcrap from the very start, from the very beginning, from the very idea of them. So they were issues in search of plaintiffs. They were issues, just like Citizens United was also, it was an issue of bribery, making it legal in search of a plaintiff, in search of somebody who'd been harmed, okay, by not being able to bribe somebody. This is such crap. This is so ugly, and it's just as bad as, we had some really doozies of Supreme Court justices in our history. There was a guy named Taney, okay, he's the one that did, the Dred Scott decision, shepherded through his Supreme Court. I'm telling you, we've had some really twisted ideas that have been codified by the Supreme Court in an effort to legislate what they consider a good result. I won't even say legislate morality, because you can't legislate morality. What they wanted to do was legislate what they thought would be a good result, meaning, slave labor was a good result for the South. Slave labor was a good result for, the textile industry. So they manufactured, a case where a man said he was, a whole person, and they said, oh, no, you're not. No, you're not. With your three. And we lived like that. We lived like that, and we're about to live like that again, unless we prevail in this next election. And you know what's crazy? The Republicans, I used to do, basically in the iterations iterations of this show, I used to be on the radio, and all these markets would ask you to come and, do appearances, right? And so I used to go, and I mean, every single election cycle, I would go out there and I would remind people this is all about the Supreme Court. Don't forget that. When you go and when you're voting, make sure one of your issues, if not the issue that you're voting on, has nothing to do with the personality of this candidate, has nothing to do with their hair color, has nothing to do with the color of their skin, has nothing to do with, what they did on the, loan forgiveness for banks, or writing, a depressed, broken economy that the Republicans broke, right? Don't vote on those issues, because we live in a capitalistic society and it's all cyclical. It's going to go round and round and round as long as we're capitalists, right? Vote on the Supreme Court. Vote to say corporations are not people. People are people. Vote to say that you can't refuse service in public accommodations. Vote to say that modest efforts at righting institutional racist wrongs are good.
Mary had a little lamb. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
All right, the president is announcing the next steps he will take on the student loan forgiveness package that he promised 40 million Americans.
Let's listen in to him.
Millions of Americans in this country who feel disappointed and discouraged, or even a little bit angry about the court's decision today on student debt. And I must admit, I do too. Before I tell you the steps we're going to take and want to talk about what we've been able to achieve so far on student loan over the past few years. First, we made the largest increase in Pell Grants in over a decade, helping students from families who nearly all make less than $60,000 a year. Then we fixed the so-called, with the help of the department, public service loan forgiveness program. So the borrowers who got into public service, such as school teachers, police officers, social workers, service members, they actually got the debt relief they were entitled to under the law. Before I came to office, only 7,000 people had benefited from that program. Today, over 600,000 borrowers have received relief from that program. And it's still available. So many more people can be helped. And I encourage you to apply if you haven't already. You're still eligible. Go to studentaid.gov. It matters. Third, my administration improved the program from the Obama-Biden administration on income-driven repayment plan. That's what it was referred to as. Back then, we set a limit. Student borrowers would pay no more than 10% of their disposable income to pay back their debt in any one time. My administration is going to reduce that to 5%. It's now the most generous repayment program ever. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether from a community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their disposable income to repay their loan. And that's income after you pay for the necessities like housing and food and the like. Typical borrower is going to save about $1,000 a year. And if you keep up payments for 20 years without missing them, your total debt is forgiven after 20 years. That's what the program was before, but we've just reduced it to 5%. In addition to that, last year I announced my student debt relief plan, a plan that was on the verge of providing more than 40 million Americans with real debt relief, up to $10,000 for many borrowers and up to $20,000 for those who had gotten a Pell Grant. Nearly 90% of the relief would have gone to borrowers, 90% of it, making less than $75,000 a year. And no one making over $125,000 would qualify. This program was all set to begin. The website had been set up, the applications had been simplified so that it took less than 5 minutes to complete. Notice had been sent out to people about the relief they were eligible for. 16 million people. 16 million people had already been approved. The money was literally about to go out the door. And then Republican elected officials and special interests stepped in. They said, no, literally snatching from the hands of millions of Americans thousands of dollars in student debt relief that was about to change their lives. You know, these Republican officials just couldn't bear the thought of providing relief for working class, middle class Americans. Republican state officials sued my administration, attempting to block relief, including millions of their own constituents. Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the plan. I think every one. I don't think I had any Republican votes for this plan. At the same time, think about this. We all supported the Paycheck Protection Program. Remember PPP? You know, which was designed to help business owners who lost money because of the pandemic. It was a worthy program. But let's be clear. Some of the same elected Republicans, members of Congress who strongly opposed giving relief to students, got hundreds of thousands of dollars themselves in relief, members of Congress.
Right.
Because of the businesses they were able to keep open. Several members of Congress got over $1 million. All those loans were forgiven. You know how much that program cost? $760 billion. My program's too expensive. $360 billion more than I proposed in my student debt relief program. I was trying to provide students with $10,000 to $20,000 relief. By comparison, the average amount forgiven in the PPP, the pandemic loan program, average amount forgiven was $70,000. Now a kid making $60,000, trying to pay back his bills, asking for $10,000 in relief. Come on, the hypocrisy is stunning.
It is.
You can't help a family making 75 grand a year, but you can help a millionaire and you have your debt forgiven. My plan would not only have been life-changing for millions of Americans, it would have been good for the American economy. Freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt. More homes would have been bought, more businesses would have been started, more couples would have had the confidence to start a family. Millions of people would have felt they could get on with their lives. These Republicans blocked all that. Now, in addition to the hypocrisy, some of these Republicans in Congress are shamelessly pushing to advance a bill in the coming weeks that gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and handouts to the wealthiest Americans. They still haven't given up on making permanent a $2 trillion tax cut that they never paid for. Never paid for. $2 trillion. So let me be clear. For Republicans in Congress, it's not about reducing the deficit. It's not about fairness in forgiving loans. It's only about forgiving loans they have to pay. Today, the Supreme Court sided with them. I believe the court's decision to strike down my student debt relief program was a mistake, was wrong. I'm not going to stop fighting to deliver borrowers what they need, particularly those at the bottom end of the economic scale. So we need to find a new way, and we're moving as fast as we can. First, I'm announcing today a new path consistent with today's ruling to provide student debt relief to as many borrowers as possible, as quickly as possible. We will ground this new approach in a different law than my original plan, the so-called Higher Education Act. That will allow Secretary Cardona, who's with me today, to compromise, waive, or release loans under certain circumstances. This new path is legally sound. It's going to take longer, but in my view, it's the best path that remains to providing for as many borrowers as possible with debt relief. I've directed my team to move as quickly as possible under the law. Just moments ago, Secretary Cardona took the first step to initiate that new approach. We're not going to waste any time on this. We're getting moving on it. It's going to take longer, but we're getting at it right away. Second, we know what many borrowers will need to make their hard choices, which their budgets are being strained now when they start to repay their monthly loan payments this fall. You know, we know that figuring out how to pay these added expenses can take time for borrowers, and they might miss payments at the front end as they get back into repayment. Normally, this could lead borrowers to fall into delinquency and default. But without their it will hurt their financial security, and that's not good for them or the economy.
Right.
That's why we're creating a temporary 12-month, what we're calling on-ramp repayment program. Now, this is not the same as a student loan pause. It's been in effect for the past 3 years. Monthly payments will be due. Bills will not go out, and interest will be accruing. And during this period, if you can pay your monthly bills, you should. But if you cannot, if you miss payments, this on-ramp will temporarily remove the threat of default or having your credit harmed, which can hurt borrowers for years to come. Because the Department of Education won't refer borrowers. And the reason why that will work, they won't refer borrowers who miss payments to credit agencies for 12 months to give them a chance to get back up and running. Let me close with this.
All right.
Our Republican officials say student loan relief is a giveaway to the privileged.
Huh.
You hear that loud now, the privileged. I love their concern for the privileged. But I know who student loan borrowers are in this country.
Yeah.
So do all you. There's a couple putting off having a child until they can find their way to deal with their debt. That's who they are. They're young putting off buying their first home so they can get out from under student loans.
Yeah, really.
Hope on the horizon, thanks to relief that I planned last year.
All right, you get the idea. He's not giving up on student loan relief. Thank God.
Things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Professor, I want to read part of what Clarence Thomas said in his concurring opinion. He said, quote, today's 17-year-olds, after all, did not live through the Jim Crow era, enact or enforce segregation laws, or take any action to oppress or enslave the victims of the past. Whatever their skin color, today's youth simply are not responsible for instituting the segregation of the 20th century, and they do not shoulder the moral debts of their ancestors. Our nation should not punish today's youth for the sins of the past.
Yeah, no, Brother Clarence, he's wrong again. The new Jim Crow is still in place. Mass incarceration is still in place. Segregated places of where we live, segregated schools that we go to are still in place. So that when you talk about, well, Jim Crow is over, no, Jim Crow Jr. is very strong and operating. Mass incarceration is a form of Jim Crow, in some ways even an extension of slavery. So, Clarence, you're wrong, brother. Love you, you're wrong as you can be. And in fact, we're going to have to come up with some creative loving, civically oriented ways of wrestling with this vicious legacy of white supremacy. You don't do it by claiming Justice Robert. We can be indifferent to it.
Really, that's Cornel West, and Cornel West is running for president now, and he's the right guy. Let's just say wrong party. I don't know what to say, but Cornel West is throwing his hat in the ring as a third-party candidate, and he does make a very, very important point right there in those last 40 seconds that of his time that he gave us. Right? What is he saying? He's saying Jim Crow is alive and well. It is. It is absolutely alive and well. Now we have court-sanctioned bigotry against LGBT people. You can say anything you want. You can deny service to anyone you want because it's free speech to do that. It's public accommodations, okay? It's a non-discriminatory environment that we are trying to get to. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, no, if your religion tells you that you must discriminate against this person or that person, or you can find slavery is countenanced in your Bible, in your interpretation of the Bible, well, then go have at it. Go ahead and, enslave people. But the more important thing is we still have an unequal society. And one of the things he brings up is mass incarceration. That is the new Jim Crow. And everybody out there knows it. Anybody who drives while black knows it, too. And any parent of a black child knows it because they have to have the talk about driving while black with their black child currently in today's environment, in today's United States of America. And this isn't even dealing with what I just described to you as institutionalized affirmative action for white people. And that is the U.S. Senate. That is an institutionalized affirmative action program that guarantees rural places, guarantees people with small populations, small states, the same representation, the same number of votes that 40 million people in California get, that 30 million people in Florida get, that 30 million people in New York State get. They get the same number of votes, the same representation as less than 1 million people that live in Wyoming get. That's affirmative action. Electoral college, same thing. Popular vote doesn't matter because if it did, the number of votes would be much more important. And guess what that would mean? That would mean that Texas and California has more of a say who's president than, Wyoming does. We can't have that. We got to have affirmative action. Got to have it. We need it. Have to have it. Can't live without it. And that's why we have to have the electoral college. That's why. I mean, this is such a garbagey conversation because it's a conversation about things we already figured out. It's a conversation about problems we already solved and that we were building towards, nobody gets hurt. We were building towards that. And now they pull the rug out and they make us start from the beginning of time again. I swear to God, it's disgusting. The student loan thing, I will tell you, that's something that will work its way through the House of Representatives and the Senate. It will. But, I saw Tim Scott. He already has an ad up running. Tim Scott, the only black Senate Republican, right? And he's saying, Joe Biden wants you to pay for a law degree. Joe Biden wants you to pay for a doctor's education. That's bull crap, okay? And it's evidenced by the income restrictions that are on the loan program, right? So Pell Grants, you can't make more than 60 grand and even have a Pell Grant. So there's that. And then there's no relief over $125,000, right? No relief at all. Then there's, the social workers, the nurses, people who make 40, 50, even maybe sometimes $70,000 a year by working 150 billion hours a week, tending to you and your soily little body when you're feeling like at the absolute worst you'll ever feel. We don't need to, do anything to help social workers who make, $40,000, $50,000 a year. We don't need to do anything to relieve, nurses of student loans that they have been paying. I was shocked when we first started talking about student loans, I got to tell you, because that's when my eyes got opened. I had no earthly idea because I never went to college, right? So this is like a blind spot I had, but not anymore thanks to you guys, right? So I didn't realize that somebody who went to nursing school 20, 30 years ago, seriously, is still paying back their student loan? Because nurses aren't compensated properly and because student loans accrued interest. And it just constantly accrues interest. And, I had no idea what a humongous, disgusting problem it really is. And that's why Joe Biden promised that he would do something about it. And when COVID came, people needed relief because they couldn't work. They couldn't pay their student loans. So we came up with the HERO Act. And the banks hate it. They hate it. They hate it. But nurses and social workers and criminal justice people, people that go into like blood spatter analysis, not that they're all serial killers, Dexter, but, people that go into those, interesting careers, they need to go to college. They need education. They need criminal justice backgrounds. John Jay College is a college by my old house. And I always wanted to go there. I always thought Queens College was high school with ashtrays, but I thought John Jay would be a cool place to go to start my legal inquiries, and maybe build on it and become a lawyer one day. But oh hell no. I joined the Air Force instead. And isn't it interesting to you that the big affirmative action case yesterday carved out the military? Meaning the military can still use affirmative action to capture people for their service academies, people of color. They can use race as a conscious, plus or minus 5 points. But no one else can? Really? Why is that? Somebody, I think it was Ketanji Brown Jackson who wrote she wrote part of her dissent. Was it either her or Sonia? There's so many right now. I'm like shell-shocked. I swear to God. I feel like incoming. It's just, woo! Right? Because there were three big ones, plus, last year's Roe v. Wade over. But somebody wrote, I don't know if it's Sonia Sotomayor or if it's Ketanji Brown Jackson, but it was brilliant. They said that, affirmative action, not in the boardroom, but yeah, in the bunker. Freaking brilliant. You could die for your country and we'll give you extra points for being black. But not in the boardroom, baby. Ain't no room for you. Oh, speaking of the boardroom, you know that Abby Grossman, that Dominion producer at Fox, she just won $12 million.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, Rich in Denver. Hello, happy freaking Friday.
Happy Friday, my dear bastards and all.
Thank you.
Randy, you're on fire as usual. I have the exact quote because I took a picture of it. It was Ketanji Brown Jackson, and here it is. Black Americans and other underrepresented minorities for success in the bunker, not in the boardroom.
Yes, that's it.
I am, as the caller from, I think Gary, yesterday from 4, I am sickened and, like you, Randy, saddened and ashamed
I'm grieving.
Be a white American. Yeah.
Right.
In this country. I have had it with a rapist, drunkie, alcoholic on the court, a bimbo Coney Island judge who would never try a case, and this fat ass Donnie Bin Laden, and I am just absolutely sickened with these worms, white old racist males and their female counterparts. It's just absolutely, thank God Joe Biden is gonna keep fighting for the student loan forgiveness. Randy, like you, I was a driver, not 18-wheelers, but in one of my careers, I was a hack. I was a cab driver for a couple of years.
My grandpa
and
was.
I would have women. I would have women in my car that would be crying that said, "I have $80,000 in student loan debt, and I have no earthly idea how I'm going to be able to pay those off." It's just. It's as you've said many times before, Randy, we're all black now.
Yes.
We're all gay now. We're all in the stew now.
We're all black women now is what we are. We're all black women now. We have no right to privacy. That's the women part. People can discriminate against us, if their religion tells them that, it's in the Bible, we get to own you. So that's the black part. And the idea that we're all going to, be slaves to debt. Debtor's prison, all of it is on the table. Every last part of it is, everything old is new again. I've always said that, right? There's nothing new under the sun.
Exactly.
Right.
And as another one of your brilliantly famous quotes is, in chaos they can steal, and that's exactly. Randy, can you imagine what happens when they take up mixed marriages on the court?
Oh my God!
Will Clarence House and Thomas, will he recuse himself? Because he's married to.
He thinks he's white. He does. He really does. He believes it. He has internalized.
He'll never be white, though. As you said yesterday, you'll never, no matter what you do,
right,
Clarence.
Right. You ought to be proud. You really ought to. You ought to find your own pride in your story, the same way Ketanji Brown Jackson has pride in her story. But instead, he's damaged by where he comes from. He feels less than because he moves in a crowd of people that surround him, telling, like a whole bunch of yes men, telling him that what he thinks and what he wants to achieve is it's all good. It's all for the good. It's all, and they give him awards and they praise him and they tell him you should loathe affirmative action, even though without it, he would not have the most powerful job of any black man in all of law in this country. Okay. He has the single most powerful position. And instead of, touting his story, inspiring younger people, telling everybody that, a little bit of a boost, a modest remedy for where I came from was what it took for me to, have an opportunity to show everybody how brilliant I am, to show everybody how excellent a human I am, to show everybody how decisive I am and how, gifted I am. Instead, he's full of self-loathing and despises himself and wants to take it out on you.
And you, me, and everybody, it's just absolutely sickening and abhorrent. And I mean, I was telling Brett,
stop.
That lady, the web. I was watching her on the news before I called you, Randy.
Was she on the TV?
She was blubbering. She was blubbering like clutching her pearls, and she said, "Oh, my life has been threatened. My address has been put on the website." I am just so seething with these front-running
phonies,
Anglo-Saxon Protestant, white old racists. I have just had it with these people. Women should be running the things. Women. It's like we wouldn't be even in this mess if Hillary had been elected. It just sickens and saddens and shames me that in this country, that in 2023, that we are talking, and we've got to roll back not only the filibuster and the electoral college, which are Jim Crow BS. We've also got to get rid of the OLC BS opinion, and we damn sure push Biden, and everybody's got to vote to make the Senate filibuster proof, and we got to blow it out in the elections this November and get rid of people like Bobo and Large Marge down in Florida, Betty and Veronica of the Archie Club, and just get rid of these people and get in the young people, the Gen Zs and the Gen Xs. And we can't have 23% voting in non-presidential elect. Everybody's got to get in.
Yeah.
23% what is it, 28% of Asians? That's more than a quarter and almost a third. What racism, If there's no race, what equality? If there's no racism.
So you want to hear? I need to play this. Okay, let me let you go, Rich, because I feel your frustration and your desire to
shot out of a cannon, Rich, today, boy.
I understand, because it's we're grieving. We're actually mourning for some sort of country that we could be proud of. I mean, it's going down, the crapper. I don't know how else to say. But here's Kenny Zhu. Okay, Kenny Zhu is a right-wing activist who was part of this Mr. Blum's effort. He's a white conservative freak of nature who's been trying to get rid of affirmative action for 10 years. He finally crafted a plan. And the plan that he had was to pit one minority group, I swear to God, against another. So he decided he would use what we consider to be model immigrants to our country, Asian Americans, and pit them against African Americans in order to further his cause, which was to get rid of affirmative action in higher education. So this is one of the kids that Mr. Blum found, and he was articulating his outrage yesterday while he was taking a victory lap, and he was lying. and saying some of the most disgusting bullcrap. I don't know if this kid knows that what he's saying is bullcrap because, like I said, they surround you. These conservative groups and these conservative talking point people and the conservative moneyed elite, they surround you like they surrounded Clarence and they surround Amy Coney, and they give them awards and they hold dinners and they praise them and they get invited to cocktail parties where they're superstars and heroes and where, you know, I'm sure they did it to these kids too. When I come, I just got to play you 2 short clips of this kid. His name's Kenny Chu, XU. Kenny Chu. Oh my God. And, you know, CNN is so scared to actually, you know, like argue with somebody who's promoting garbage that they just said, okay, thank you for your time, you know, and didn't debug. Wow, this is crazy. This is bad. But this is the kind of garbage that it takes to do.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Okay, here's Kenny Chu. He's a right-wing activist, and he's actually going to sit here and tell you that Asian Americans are superior. I swear to God, superior to Black Americans.
I just want to say I'm ecstatic about this decision. It means that Asian Americans can finally get treated on their merits. Guys, we know why Asian Americans should get into Harvard at disproportionate rates. It's because they study twice as many hours as the average American. It's not because of their race. It's because of their culture. It's because of their family values. Academic excellence, that should be prioritized. Those should be the values that schools like Harvard and Chapel Hill, supposedly elite schools and academic programs, should be valuing in an applicant, not race.
Wow. So he really does believe, because they've told him, this Mr. Blum guy who's been trying to get rid of affirmative action for 10 years, told this kid and a whole bunch of right-wing activists just like him, that your culture, your Asian American culture is superior to everybody else's culture. Now, the guy Blum that's doing it, he's a conservative Jew. So how in the world is he letting anybody say that one culture is superior to another culture when he knows damn well that's not true? All cultures value their children, and all cultures try to achieve as much excellence in their community as they could possibly foster. This is so bad, but it gets worse. Listen to this. I just, when he was saying this, my skin was crawling because he's a young guy, and they filled his head with garbage.
If you take race out of the picture and you do what the president is suggesting, taking socioeconomic status into consideration, do you think that that would be fair to Asian American students as well?
No, I don't. I think that admissions should be only based on merit. And the reason why is because you can't, why are we asking a university to calculate somebody's level of adversity? I think that that sets a very bad precedent for anybody trying to get into college. We should be treated on the basis of our merits. We should be treated on the basis of how hard we work, our study, our SAT scores, our grades. A name-blind, race-blind process is what I would advocate for as president of Forest United.
Kenny, can I ask you, though? I mean, colleges, obviously, they care about grades and SAT scores, but they also are filling universities of people, human beings, who have other factors that they bring to the table. Why is it not okay for them to consider those things?
I'm saying if you're going to consider those things, you should consider them without respect to race.
Sure.
So as you know, a lot of Asian Americans.
I think that that's exactly right. But socioeconomic status doesn't. If you take race out of it, let's call it socioeconomic status, where whether or not they grew up wealthy or poor, is that not something that colleges might have an interest in considering?
The reason why you shouldn't consider that is because you should consider the success of an applicant. Because of affirmative action, Black Americans graduate from law school at the bottom 25% of their classes, largely speaking. And we don't want that. We want Black students to succeed. We want every student to succeed, low-income students to succeed. But you have to put them in scenarios, in places where they're likely to succeed. And lowering your standard to admit somebody of a socioeconomic status or race would not help them do that. In fact, it would harm their graduation rate and excellence.
Well, as the case also points out, the standard isn't necessarily lowered because students are all admitted. The question is whether race can be an added consideration, a tipping point
No,
in
the
some
standard
of these
is
cases.
lowered. The standard is lowered. The standard is lowered as the student merit admissions data shows. An Asian has to score 273 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a black person. So the standard is lowered for black Americans.
Oh my God. Okay, so that particular little factoid there has been debunked like 1,000 times over the last 10 years. Okay, that is just garbage in, garbage out. There is nothing that says that any test taker of any race has to get 270 more points on an SAT than any other group. That's just not true. The idea that, colleges are looking for leaders for tomorrow, especially elite schools like Harvard, like Yale, like Princeton. They're looking for the leaders of tomorrow by looking at what kind of challenges you may have had that you've slayed in your life. Like how did you deal with adversity? And you're like, oh, I don't think we ought to consider adversity. I think it should be, But there are people you're trying to pick. Yeah, well, blacks they have the standards lowered for that. This is such racist, ugly garbage. And I mean, I was watching that last night and I was like, did he just wait? Rewind. Listen to it again. Did he just wait? Rewind. Yeah. He actually said standards are lowered for African American students at Harvard. I mean, this is just so bizarre, okay? Bizarre.
Let me just be clear. I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. I went to a school no one had ever heard of in Denver, Colorado, in a small suburb. I didn't go to Exeter or Andover. I didn't have college test prep. I just happened to be really nerdy and smart and have really good grades and good SAT scores. But someone came to Denver, Colorado to look for me. A Harvard recruiter flew to Denver, and I met up with her at the Village Inn restaurant and did a pre-interview to get to pull me into Harvard. I was pulled in, and the schools like Harvard and Yale that I got into affirmatively. And it was literally not saying we're going to take an unqualified person and put them in Harvard. We're going to take a very qualified person who we would never know existed and put them in Harvard. That's how I got there. That's how Ketanji got there. That's how Justice Jackson, I should say. Justice Jackson got there. It's how Clarence Thomas got there. But the minute I arrived from my majority black little town, Montbello in Denver, to Harvard, the first week or two that I was in class, my presence was questioned by white people. I was in this big conference class where some white students stood up and said, those students, the black students, they're only here because of affirmative action. It became a huge argument that we all ended up having. This was freshman year. I had never had my academic credentials questioned. I had never had anyone question whether I was intelligent until I got to Harvard. And it was a defining point of my experience there. It's why I really was one of the many reasons I was miserable there my freshman year. You feel completely out of place and people keep telling you shouldn't be here. And yet, some of the people I went to school with were far less smart than me or the other black folk there. They got in because their daddy and their granddaddy. I went to school with somebody whose name was on one of the buildings. You're going to school with people whose names are on the buildings, who are third and fourth generation legacies, whose parents pumped money into Harvard to get them in. But that affirmative action is okay with this majority. They said that the people who benefited from slavery, their descendants, who are so far ahead of black folk in terms of opportunity that we'll never catch up to them. I don't care how many Oprahs we get. Those people's affirmative action is A-okay because those people can pay for fancy trips for them. But you people who want to get in just because of your brains, but you're not from a legacy, too bad. You can't come in.
I mean, that is the real story, okay? That is the real story. And yes, they affirmatively went and recruited Ketanji Brown Jackson, recruited Joy Reid, recruited Clarence Thomas from his bum F town in Georgia, okay? And he just really will never, ever, ever be able to, rectify that in his head, that he was as good as everybody else. He was as bright. He was as smart. But they affirmatively went and got him to go to Harvard Because if they didn't, no one would know he existed.
Clarence Thomas was born in Pinpoint, Georgia. He is of the Gullah extraction.
Yep.
He didn't even speak English until he was 7 years old. He spoke the Geechee tongue and was so afraid to speak in front of white people because he was always told, don't speak Geechee in front of white people because it would embarrass you, that he almost never spoke at all. There was a nun, a white nun, whose largesse helped get him through school and get him those good grades. He has been assisted by white patrons, really his whole life, even now by very rich ones, as they fly him around the country. And to your very point, he seems to deeply resent all of the assistance he got, and he wants to make sure that nobody like him ever gets that kind of help again, because it helps his self-image so that he can lie to himself and fool himself and maybe hate himself a little less for having gotten help all along his path to the Supreme Court.
So we're all paying for the pathology of, broken men. I mean, this is really sad, and that's why we're grieving. Okay, you understand? That's why we're grieving. I just want to say thank you, Brother David, for calling on Friday, for being there.
Oh, sister,
Love you.
It is a fraught and frightening fascist Friday. As I said to the chat room, hi chat room. The Supreme Court is clearly no longer a judicial institution. It is a royalist entity.
Yes.
And we, the people, must show up in November.
You know what they are?
And
you know what they
continue to
really
show
are?
up.
They're a corporate law firm. That's what they are. They're nothing more than that. They're nothing more than that. And the pathology that's swirling around in some of their heads, we're all going to pay for. Just like we all pay for a sexual abusive, fraud